It may look like certain people move through life as though they never need anyone. They seem completely independent, emotionally unreachable, and untouched by relationships. Maybe you've loved someone like that, or perhaps you recognize some of those traits within yourself. From the outside, they appear calm in moments when other people would be devastated. They walk away without showing much emotion, keep others at a careful distance, and act as if nothing can truly affect them. But what many people fail to understand is that this distance doesn't prove they feel nothing. Often, it means they feel far more than they're comfortable admitting. They may have learned to protect themselves by burying whatever emotions feel too powerful. And once you understand that, the way you look at avoidant behavior begins to shift. Behind the silence, emotional shutdowns, and constant need for personal space is often someone who rarely acknowledges how important genuine connection really is. The truth is, they may only experience an exceptionally deep bond with a very rare kind of person. If you've ever cared for someone with avoidant tendencies, or struggled with these patterns yourself, stay with this, because what comes next can change how you understand their behavior. Eventually, there can come a moment when those carefully constructed walls start to crack, when control slowly gives way to real emotion. Most people never get to see that side of them. They only encounter the guarded exterior, the part designed to keep everyone at a comfortable distance. Yet the few who manage to reach beyond those defenses can become almost impossible to forget. Once an avoidant allows someone into that deeply protected part of their inner world, the connection can leave an impression that doesn't simply vanish. One of the strongest beliefs many people hold is, "I don't need anyone." It sounds confident. It can even sound like strength. Many avoidant people teach themselves that depending on someone else is dangerous, that love automatically creates vulnerability, and that complete independence is the safest possible way to live. If you've ever tried loving someone who behaves this way, you already understand how painful and lonely it can become. You can sit right next to them, have long conversations, share ordinary moments, and still feel as though there's an invisible door you cannot open. The independence they display isn't always genuine confidence. In many cases, it began as a survival strategy. It developed during earlier experiences when closeness led to disappointment, when trust resulted in pain, or when affection never felt emotionally secure. Slowly, they learned a private rule. Depending on someone eventually leads to heartbreak. Those lessons don't automatically disappear just because someone grows older. They quietly follow them into future relationships, shaping the way they handle conflict, the way they disappear when things become intense, and even the way they communicate affection. They may repeatedly say they're happier alone, but human nature tells another story. Whether someone has an avoidant, anxious, or secure attachment pattern, people are built for connection. Somewhere beneath all that resistance, an avoidant person can still want closeness deeply. The difficult part is admitting that desire. Sometimes they haven't even admitted it to themselves. Watch carefully when emotions begin becoming intense. They might appear completely composed in everyday situations, but conversations about feelings can quickly make them uncomfortable. As emotional intimacy increases, they may suddenly create distance. When commitment becomes more serious, they may start asking for space. It can look like they simply don't care, but underneath that reaction, there is often something completely different happening. Fear can be behind those responses, rather than a lack of emotion. They may be afraid of being fully understood, because being truly seen can feel dangerous. And here's where the contradiction becomes fascinating. They can want love just as deeply as anyone else. They want affection. They want understanding. They want to feel emotionally safe with someone. But when those things stop being imaginary and begin becoming real, anxiety can appear. Love demands vulnerability, and vulnerability brings the possibility of rejection, abandonment, disappointment, and emotional injury. So, rather than moving closer when the bond becomes meaningful, their instinct may tell them to step backward. They create thicker walls, increase their distance, and then everyone around them mistakes that behavior for emotional strength. From the outside, it may seem like they've mastered the art of being alone. Internally, though, They can carry the same hunger for connection that other people carry. The idea that avoidant people cannot love deeply or don't genuinely need relationships simply doesn't tell the whole story. They can love, they can care intensely. Their struggle often begins when real closeness finally arrives and they don't know what to do with it. If you've ever been close to someone with these patterns, you've probably experienced the contradiction firsthand. One day they're warm, relaxed, playful, and emotionally available. They laugh more easily. They share private thoughts. They let you glimpse a softer side that most people never see. Then suddenly, without an obvious explanation, they become quiet, distant, cold, or difficult to reach. You may start questioning everything. Were those earlier moments genuine? Yes, they were. That openness was real. The withdrawal afterward doesn't erase it. Often, fear simply regained control. They aren't necessarily pulling away because their feelings disappeared. Sometimes they're retreating because those feelings became too powerful to manage. And if you've ever wondered why the person who seemed closest suddenly became unreachable, keep listening, because this next part matters. Many avoidant people spend years trying to persuade themselves that emotional closeness isn't necessary. They bury those needs under work, distractions, ambitious goals, endless projects, or constant productivity. They fill every quiet moment because silence might force them to confront feelings they've been avoiding. They may tell everyone they're completely comfortable alone, and perhaps they genuinely believe it. But when the noise finally stops, there can be a strange emptiness underneath all that activity. They may not know how to describe it. They may not even recognize it as loneliness. Yet people who truly know them can sometimes sense that something is missing, even when the person never says a word. Then, every once in a while, life introduces someone who feels different. Someone who doesn't chase them relentlessly. Someone who doesn't demand immediate emotional access. Someone who doesn't try to force intimacy or punish them for needing space. Instead, this person remains calm, patient, consistent, and emotionally safe. And without fully understanding what's happening, something inside the avoidant person begins to relax. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, connection doesn't feel like a threat. It feels peaceful. That experience can be incredibly powerful, precisely because it happens so rarely. When someone shows them that closeness doesn't automatically mean losing freedom, being controlled, or eventually being hurt, the nervous system begins learning a different lesson. And because those moments are unusual, they can become unforgettable. The avoidant person may never openly admit how important that relationship was. They may even behave as though they have completely moved forward, but internally, they can continue remembering the person who made vulnerability feel less frightening. This is why the image of avoidant people as simply detached, cold, or emotionally isolated tells only one small part of the story. Their independence can become an identity built for protection. Beneath that identity remains a very human desire to be loved, understood, accepted, and emotionally safe with another person. They've spent so much time believing that self-reliance is their strongest shield, that opening their heart can feel like breaking a rule they've followed for years. And that's exactly what can make their meaningful connections so significant. When someone who spent years believing they needed nobody finally allows another person into their private emotional world, even slightly, the experience can change something inside them. A relationship that requires that much courage naturally carries tremendous emotional weight. So the next time someone withdraws, shuts down, becomes distant, or appears impossible to reach, remember this: distance doesn't always equal rejection. Sometimes, distance is protection. Sometimes it is fear of being vulnerable, fear of getting hurt again, fear of becoming dependent, or fear that the person they finally trust might eventually leave. Seeing the behavior through that lens can change everything. Instead of interpreting every step backward as proof that they don't love you, you begin noticing the frightened part underneath the calm exterior. You stop reacting automatically. You stop chasing every time they pull away. You begin understanding the pattern. You replace pressure with patience. You create room without disappearing. Avoidant people don't necessarily need someone to save them, repair them, or force them to change overnight. What they often need are repeated experiences that teach them a new emotional lesson. Closeness doesn't always end in pain. Love doesn't automatically become loss. Depending on someone doesn't automatically mean losing yourself. And needing another person isn't a weakness. It's part of being human. The armor may look like independence, but beneath that armor is a heart with many of the same desires everyone carries. The desire to belong, the hope of being accepted, the wish to feel completely understood without constantly protecting yourself. Most people never reach that hidden place with an avoidant person. They only experience the guarded version, the version that keeps the door closed. You can spend years beside someone like this and still feel as though you're standing outside their emotional world, wondering what you're doing wrong or whether you're enough. But their distance usually isn't a measurement of your value. It's often connected to a belief they developed long before you entered their life. Closeness is dangerous. Still, there are exceptions. There are rare people who don't fight the walls. They don't try to tear them down. They simply create enough emotional safety that the walls slowly become unnecessary. And when that happens, something remarkable can occur. The person who once believed they needed nobody may discover that letting one person truly matter doesn't make them weaker. It may finally allow them to experience the connection they were protecting themselves from all along. It wasn't because that person chased harder or demanded more affection. It was because they never awakened the fear underneath the surface. They brought calm instead of pressure, consistency instead of emotional chaos, and safety instead of uncertainty. And that is often where everything starts to shift. They don't force the avoidant person to open up. Instead, they provide an experience that may have been almost completely unfamiliar to them. Their presence feels steady, predictable, and emotionally secure. Rather than feeling trapped, the avoidant slowly becomes comfortable enough to stop escaping. Think about someone who has been burned repeatedly. After enough pain, they begin fearing every flame. Then one day, they encounter warmth that doesn't hurt. Something inside them changes. They begin to understand that not every source of heat brings pain. That is what this rare person can represent. They don't erase years of fear or destroy every emotional wall in a single moment. What they do is show, again and again, that their presence doesn't activate those old protective reactions. They offer peace without pressure, affection without overwhelming demands, and honesty without emotional confusion. That combination can feel strange, but strangely comforting. And slowly, almost without either person noticing, the armor begins to loosen. Here's where things get interesting, because many people who love someone avoidant unknowingly respond in ways that strengthen the very fears they're trying to overcome. They chase harder. They ask for reassurance constantly. They try desperately to close every inch of emotional distance. That's understandable. When you care deeply, you naturally want evidence that the other person cares too. But to an avoidant, excessive pressure can confirm their deepest belief that closeness is too much, and therefore unsafe. The rare person doesn't participate in that cycle. They don't get trapped in the endless pattern of pursuing, withdrawing, chasing, and running. They remain emotionally grounded. They care deeply, but they don't demand instant proof of love. They allow space without vanishing completely. They stay present without becoming controlling. And perhaps for the first time, the avoidant doesn't feel trapped in a corner. That doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy treatment or pretending emotional distance never hurts. It means being genuine while maintaining self-respect. Their behavior quietly communicates something powerful. This is who I am. I'm not going to chase you, but I'm not going to abandon you either. That balance between clear boundaries and steady presence can create an experience many avoidant people have never known. And from that point, the transformation usually happens gradually. The walls don't suddenly crash down. Instead, one small piece lowers at a time. Maybe they begin telling you more about their day. Maybe their laughter becomes more natural around you. Maybe they hold your hand for a few extra seconds instead of immediately pulling away. These moments may appear insignificant, but they can reveal something important. Trust is growing beneath the surface. If you're the person providing that sense of safety, you may have no idea how deeply your behavior is affecting them. Avoidant people rarely announce that they're learning to trust you. They don't usually sit down and explain it. You see it through small changes. Their guarded expression becomes softer. Their warmth becomes easier to access. The invisible distance between you slowly decreases. And none of this is effortless for them. Every protective instinct they've developed tells them to retreat. Opening their heart can feel like exposing the most vulnerable parts of themselves. It challenges everything they learned about staying safe. Yet somehow, they choose to remain. They don't stay because they've suddenly stopped having avoidant tendencies. They stay because something about the relationship begins to feel worth the risk. And that's exactly why these connections can be so rare. You can be incredibly kind, patient, understanding, and loving, and still never reach that hidden emotional place inside another person. It isn't always about how much effort you give. It comes down to emotional safety. It comes down to whether your presence helps their nervous system settle or makes it feel threatened. When they encounter someone who creates that kind of calm, they can sense the difference, even if they don't have the words to explain it. In the beginning, they may actually resist it. They might move closer, then suddenly create distance, then return again. Those confusing signals aren't necessarily manipulation or games. Sometimes they're silent questions. Can I trust this? Is this person really safe? If I step back for a while, will they punish me or disappear? When the answer is steady consistency instead of panic, pressure, or pursuit, something inside them slowly begins reorganizing. They start learning that safety can exist within a relationship. That doesn't mean they suddenly become perfect partners. Old fears can still return. They may still need occasional space. They may still struggle to communicate during emotional moments. But something important has changed. They have experienced closeness without losing themselves. They've felt affection without chaos. They've discovered that intimacy doesn't automatically lead to suffering. And once that lesson becomes deeply rooted, it can be difficult to forget. The relationship itself becomes part of their emotional understanding. The most beautiful part of this transformation isn't found in dramatic declarations or enormous romantic gestures. It's created through ordinary moments of consistency. It's built by someone who stays present without controlling, loves without possessing, and communicates honestly without creating emotional storms. When an avoidant person experiences that kind of balance, their entire perception of relationships can begin to shift. They stop automatically viewing connection as something they must escape. Many people assume avoidant individuals are destined to choose distance forever, but often they are waiting for an experience that feels safe enough to challenge what they've believed about love for years. When that person finally enters their life, the connection may become far more meaningful than simple attraction or excitement. It can become one of the deepest emotional experiences they've ever known. Their walls may look impossible to get through. Their silence may seem endless. Their distance may appear permanent. Yet all of it can begin changing because one person approached them differently. No matter how carefully they protect themselves, even someone highly avoidant can long for a relationship where running away is no longer necessary. When they form a genuine bond with someone, it isn't just another ordinary relationship. It can carry enormous emotional significance because they are choosing something they've spent years learning to fear. They don't offer that level of trust easily. Their entire emotional system has been built around protecting themselves. Distance became a way to survive. So when those defenses finally begin coming down, it represents one of the greatest emotional risks they've ever accepted. That kind of connection reaches much deeper than what people can see on the surface. Many assume avoidant people move on quickly because they may leave physically or become emotionally silent. But genuine attachment isn't always visible from the outside. When they've truly connected with someone, they may continue carrying that relationship internally long after the distance begins. This isn't necessarily obsession or an inability to move forward. It's the reality that experiencing genuine emotional safety can change a person. Once they've felt it, their definition of love may never return to exactly what it was before. What makes such a bond powerful isn't merely attraction, convenience, or chemistry. It's the peace that came from finally not having to stay guarded every second. That feeling can leave a lasting emotional imprint. They may eventually enter other relationships and meet wonderful people. They may even create a completely different life. But if you were the person who first showed them that love could feel emotionally safe, that experience can remain uniquely meaningful. It wasn't simply about your personality or what you did. It was about the way your consistent presence reached the deepest parts of their fear, without making those fears feel exposed or threatened. Experiences like that don't happen often. Of course, this doesn't mean every struggle suddenly disappears. Emotional growth is still a process. Old habits can return. They may still pull away from time to time because patterns developed over years don't vanish overnight. But if you became the person who helped them realize they didn't always have to hide, you may have created an emotional reference point they carry for a very long time. Arguments don't necessarily erase that. Time doesn't automatically erase it. Distance doesn't automatically erase it. And that's why people often feel confused when someone avoidant withdraws after forming what seemed like an incredibly deep connection. They wonder whether the relationship was ever real. They question whether the affection meant anything. They replay every conversation and every moment of closeness, trying to find the exact point where everything changed. But the answer isn't always found in the withdrawal itself. Fear can make someone step away from something they deeply value. Silence can appear after intimacy precisely because intimacy mattered. Distance can arrive not because the connection was meaningless, but because the connection became meaningful enough to activate everything they've spent years trying to avoid. So don't judge the entire relationship by the moment they became afraid. Look at the pattern before the fear appeared. Look at the moments when they allowed you closer. Look at the ways they softened, trusted, shared, stayed, and revealed parts of themselves they normally kept hidden. Sometimes the most powerful evidence of genuine connection isn't what someone says when everything feels easy. It's what they struggle to let themselves feel when the bond becomes real.